real life, half human, half ape. Are we ready to go?
We have a couple more minutes for the...
Well, let's tell everybody about that. I'm not just being interviewed by a man in the best shirt I've ever seen. Those are boa constrictors all over his shirt. If you turn around, they can see it. All right. Continue to twirl. That's good. You see, it's almost like he was real.
My 2-packet.
This is Dr. Roger Freedman. Roger and I have been friends since about 1967 or 66, and we were local boys here in San Diego at Crawford High School. We also have one of our gang here in attendance. There's our friend Jan, who was the only girl nerd of our group, which in 1967 was kind of remarkable.
and she continues to be remarkable.
And she is remarkable anyway. But that's why I asked Roger to interview me, because he knows where all the bodies are buried. If I start making up things, he'll know when I'm full of crap. So.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Scott. Thank you all for coming today to see this Scott Shaw's life story in easy-to-understand comic strip form. And looking forward to what we can come up with. And, so, Scott, let's sort of begin at the beginning. Can you show an example of the egg being fertilized? No, I'm sorry. We don't.
Sorry, I left my genitalia up in the room.
TMI. So let's actually begin. Now, we know the thing that first got you started and interested in cartooning was actually the advent of Flintstones. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, when I was a kid, I was born in 1951, so it was kind of a in pop culture. It's interesting that dinosaurs seem to have, up to a certain point, now they're still popular year-round, but there were kind of areas in the late 1800s, there was a dinosaur fascination in England. And then I know around the 1930 World's Fair, there was a big thing on dinosaurs. Well, in the 50s, dinosaurs also were a big deal. And some of the first dinosaur toys were produced in the 50s. And those were the two things I loved the most, were dinosaurs and cartooning, in comic books and in animated cartoons. And in 1960, I had just turned 9 years old, and I knew already about this show because they actually had a fair amount of publicity about it. And even I, as a 9-year-old kid, went, hey, those are cavemen who are like the honeymooners. But I gotta tell you something. Years later, when I was working at Hanna-Barbera, Bill Hanna, I was editing the first episode of a show I produced, The Completely Mental Misadventures of Ed Grimley and Martin Short. And we had so little time, we were actually editing it on my birthday. And Bill Hanna, I told Bill Hanna, I said, boy, if you told me when I was 9 I was going to spend my birthday with Bill Hanna, I'd be the most excited kid on earth. I said, how come we're not having a good time, Mr. Hanna? And he kind of looked at me like, are you out of your effing mind? But then later, I guess he, because he knew that I was serious about being really a big fan, not just of the Flintstones, but I love Tom and Jerry, I love Ruff and Reddy and Huckhound and all the early characters. God, he almost looks like the anime Fred here. But anyway, he took me out, like out into the room outside and put his arm around me and says, kid, I got a bit of advice for you for your birthday. I was like, yes, Mr. Hanna, yes. He says, don't create anything if you can steal it. I'm not kidding. It's like the next day I come in and say, Mr. Hanna, I want to sell you this great new idea I had. It's called the Moon Rocks. It's half Jetsons and half Flintstones. Prehistoric cavemen who live in the future on the moon. He would have called and had me thrown out of the building. Anyway. Yes, exactly. Anyway, so there's a character I learned to draw from sitting in front of the TV, and I remember very specifically at age 9 saying, That's what I'm going to do. And I never had any idea that the Flintstones would actually turn out to be probably Hanna-Barbera, other than that horrible dog Scooby-Doo. Probably their best loved and certainly most long-lived series. Okay, so let's keep going here.
Yeah.
I want to slow down. I want to draw faster. Just thinking about Bill Hanna makes me want to draw faster.
Let's fast forward a couple of years.
How long do you think this would take you to draw? That'd be a week. Okay, I want it tomorrow. You know?
Exactly. Awesome. Well, let's fast forward a little bit to actually, let's take a look at two characters, see if you can draw them together. Maybe say your first published character and also the character you drew when we were in high school together at Will C. Crawford High School in San Diego, whose mascot is then and now the Colt. So let's...
This was the first thing I had when I was going to Horace Mann Junior High, and they had their newspaper was the Cougar, and that's why the lady who ran that class was always hitting on me. She liked my but anyway, I went to San Diego like a surfer, and his name was wonderfully Waldo Wipeout. I knew nothing about surfing. It was a complete steal from that Short Ribs comic strip, and I didn't care. I finally had a gag in the newspaper. Then the other character that I did at Crawford, in their paper, The Pacer, was even more out of touch with the average reader because, you know, I was a comic fan, so I thought, hey, everybody loves superheroes. Well, not the average high school kid in 1967, but this is probably a better drawing of them than ever existed at the time.
I was just going to say that.
But this was Colt Man, because our team was the Crawford Colts. And to the young cartoonists here, I need to tell you that the best thing ever is to get your work in print so people can tell you how bad you suck. Because I realized that these great, wonderful gags I was writing about these characters, because I had a whole parody of the Justice League in there and the Marvel characters, and people were essentially saying, what the hell is this about? We don't understand any of this. And it kind of got me off the idea that, you know, fandom somehow was a popular thing. Now you could probably do some of that stuff and there are enough weirdos that would understand it. But back then, you know, I was essentially playing to the three of us and maybe a couple other fan kids that we knew.
Well, thanks, Scott. Well, let's now move Scott a little bit forward. He's graduated high school, gone off to college. Of course, the natural thing you do when you go to college is you create a comic book character based on fecal matter. And so tell us a little bit about the turd.
That was from all that shit I was smoking. Thank you, Kevin.
You'll get your money.
I didn't even need to look up, and I knew who it was.
You'll look this up later, right? Okay.
This was a character. Actually, there was an issue of The Hulk that some of you may remember. It was one of Herb Trimpe's first comics, and it was the Hulk feats a monster called the Glob. And the Glob falls off this radio tower at the end and hits the pavement and explodes, so the Hulk feels like he's won. But the final page has like 3 panels at the bottom that look like dog turds, like going back together, like, oh, now you got his attention.
He just woke up.
Yeah, thinking about that guy. Hey, this guy's talking about poo. Not poo. This is just poo. Anyway, they were like crawling together like caterpillars, like to indicate that this gooey monster was coming back. And I always thought that, you know how DC Comics used a lot of dinosaurs and gorillas? I realized at some point that Marvel, mainly their stock and trade at one time, you know, the pre-hero Marvel stuff, was showing monsters made out of shit. It's a muck monster, it's a swamp monster, it's made out of goo, you know, it was like they were just like, you know, stepping around the obvious there. So anyway, my first published underground comic story was a character called the Turd. And the character was the horrible combination of I won't even go into it, but he comes out of the sewers and eats all the toilet paper in the city, and nobody wants to go outside because they don't want to go out with you know, skid marks in their pants. So that was what people knew me for. And a couple of years later at the World Science Fiction Convention, I actually covered myself with peanut butter and went as the Turd. But I'm not making that up.